Hello. Okay, so this is our module on Emily Dickinson. So if you have started this module by this point, you have already watched the video that I posted for you on her life and background. I think it is important because a lot of Emily Dickinson's life is very relevant to her work. But in this presentation, I'm going to be focusing more on the work itself, and especially in looking at some of the major themes of her work. We're going to be looking at three of her poems, specifically the three that I've assigned from the text, which are numbers 258, There's a Certain Slant of Light. Let's see, poem title 712, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and poem number 465, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. She didn't give any of her poems official titles. In fact, they weren't even meant for publication. She had written all of these hundreds of poems and had simply wrapped them in a blue ribbon and stuffed them in her bedroom drawer. She never really intended these for publication, as far as we know. So again, her poems don't have official titles. So you can either refer to them by the number that they've been assigned, or you can refer to them by the first line of each poem. And that's how we'll proceed from here. All right, and I'm going to call this slide Romanticism Meets Realism, because Emily Dickinson's work really comes at that crucial point where American Romanticism is sort of on the wane. It's kind of on the way out, and modern realism is coming in. And again, Emily Dickinson herself, both in the time that she lived and the work that she produced, really represents a sort of coming together or a blending of both romanticism and realism. And that's really what I'm going to focus on in this discussion of her work, and what I'm going to hold you all largely responsible for. These are two different images of Emily Dickinson here, by the way, at two different periods of her life. The image that you see on the left here is the most common one, the portrait of her that everybody is familiar with. But this was when she was very young. I think she was about 17 in that photo. And by all accounts, she was a pretty sickly girl. I think she had just undergone a pretty serious illness at the time that this photo was taken. She was pretty wan looking. And the image on the right, now there is some controversy about whether this actually is her or not. There's been some dispute there, but most scholars of Dickinson believe that this image is most likely her. It seems logical to me. I mean, the facial features, everything seems very similar, other than just the fact that she's a little bit older here. But I thought that that might be a good way to sort of introduce the idea of looking at this sort of duality of Dickinson torn between romanticism and realism. So in this slide here, I asked what would a merger of these two look like. So we'll have to do some review here. Again, what are those major characteristics of romanticism? Well, at least as they apply to works like Emily Dickinson's, that would be the glorification of nature, spirituality. The poems are going to be quite emotional. They're going to be very imaginative, because that was an important characteristic of Romanticism. Personification. There's going to be a lot of introspection of the I in these poems, but also personification in the sense of humanizing, in some cases, animals, inanimate objects, etc. Now, remember, Dickinson is also a bridge to the era of realism in American literature. And some of the concerns of realism are to focus on everyday life, to focus on the mundane, and sometimes this is in direct contradiction to the idea of the spiritual, because it has more to do with of earthly things. Realistic settings, imagery. This is the big era where we start to get poems that are really focused on one specific image. It's like it's just calling to mind one specific thing that the poet wants you to see or to focus on. You know, a very famous poem from this era is William Carlos Williams' The Red Wheelbarrow, for example. So much depends on a red wheelbarrow in the rain beside the glazed chickens, whatever. Can't remember the whole poem off the top of my head, but you get the idea. So the whole poem is focusing on this single image. And then we also get a lot of social commentary and realism. In poetry, like in Emily Dickinson's, social commentary could definitely come into play in a lot of her poems. I think we could certainly make the argument that there's some degree of social commentary there.